Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. This is our second proper live go at streaming it. We've done we did the big club dinner. We did a couple of practices for that, but this is it from here on in. We're going to be doing these live on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, I think as well. We're live on there as well. As we record it, and then it will go out as normal on our podcast app. So that's on Apple, Acast, Spotify, and Google Podcasts as well as Alexa. I think you can tell Alexa play Scottish Rugby Podcast, and I don't know if it plays us or the official one. If anyone's got one, try it and let us know. I'm joined this evening. There's a little bit of news around the route, so we thought it was worth putting one together. But I'm joined this evening by Ian Hay.
Buono estente.
And Sandy Smith.
Evening all.
We have also got a Patreon, and thank you very much to everybody that signed up for this. So we to do these on video, it does cost us a little bit of money. So we're after any support that you can give us. In return, we're going to give you some exclusive content for Patreons only. Ian and I have got hatching some plans for September for the Ben Skeen webisodes of our Ben Skeen sitcom. I think that's going quite well, Ian. I think we've got some rough plans hashed out for that. I think that's going to be worth it.
Yeah, we just need to see if we're going to be able to afford a second series. Get these story arcs in. Supporting cast. There's going to obviously we need like Marius Jonker and all that involved. But it'll come together.
It'll be fine. We can do all the voices. So we need to say some thank yous though, because it's for £3 a month you get access to all that, and you also get access to our super secret Facebook group, where we'll put up news about what's coming on the podcast. We'll canvass you for any questions you want to ask anybody that's coming on as well. You'll get advance notice if you go on our super secret Facebook group. So that's £3 a month, which is less than the cost of a beer. For £5 a month though, we'll read your name out on the podcast as well as a little extra. So I will just read out some names of people who've done just that. So we've got, in addition to those last week, Martin Bell, Adrian Richmond, Alan McDonald, Ben Kinross, and Davy Mill since last week have all signed up for £5 a month. So we're very grateful to them for doing that. If you visit patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast, that's where you'll find us. You can also go to www.scottishrugbyblog.co.uk, where you've got all the latest news from the world of Scottish rugby and opinion, and you can find details of how to watch us and details of our Patreon there too. Hello to Andy Lone, who's watching us on Facebook at the minute and says, "Good evening, guys. #Rugby Scotland. #Rugby United," and then a load of emojis which I can't read out because I don't speak emoji. First up, though, in the news stakes, Rory Jackson and Adam Ashe are going to be coaching at Glasgow Accies this season. Rory Jackson is backs coach, is that right, Ian? And Adam Ashe is forward/line-out coach?
Yeah, Ashe is forward/line-out. I can't remember, it was Jackson. He's either backs or skills, I think it was.
Skills, yeah.
I'll double check. I had it there, but Twitter's gone and shut it down for me, which is nice.
It's classic, good bit of time in there. The other bit of news, which is probably worth spending a bit of time on tonight, is the news that Scotland have finally got a forwards coach to replace Danny Wilson after he left to Glasgow, and it's not, they've cast the net far and wide, and it's landed in Glasgow. So John Dalziel is going to be moving from being Glasgow's forwards coach to Scotland forwards coach, and in a slightly surprise move, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on, Kelly Brown has now been signed up as Glasgow forwards coach, having been spent a stint with Saracens. He also had a time, I think, as forward coach with Canada as well. And he was in and around the Scotland camp for various points, as well as kind of like water boy / on-field communicator with his little earpiece, delivering messages from the coach's box. Sandy, I'll start with you first. John Dalziel, I mean, there's been a suggestion that perhaps current economic circumstances play a part in the fact that we've recruited internally. Would you say that's fair, or should we just be pleased that it's a Scottish appointment?
No, I don't think it's very fair, because I think we've also made I forget the other chap's name. That's the forwards coach. They've made him made his contract permanent, and he's not a kind of Scottish guy. So and John Dale's got a good track record and has worked his way up to this point. So I think there's no point in going abroad just for the sake of it if you've got somebody that's doing a good job there, and I think he can do it.
Yeah, I mean, there was again a suggestion on Twitter, Ian, that Glasgow's forwards and forwards haven't always been maybe as gritty as Edinburgh's, but there's definitely been some significant improvements in recent seasons, and certainly last season they were much better.
Yeah, it's been a quite an oft-repeated criticism of Glasgow as the sort of mealy-mouthed pack. Just on Sandy's point, is it Peter de Villiers? Is that who?
Peter de Villiers, yeah.
Scrum coach, France international, but South African born. But yeah, DL, obviously Dan McFarland's done a great job at Glasgow Warriors. We noticed a significant improvement, particularly in sort of maul defence when he took over. John Dale, he's been pretty successful wherever he's been, but I mean the fact of the matter is, he can only work with what he's got, and if he's got something like Rob Parley, an auxiliary lock as a first choice lock, he's not going to turn him into Mario Itoje, is he? So no, I think he certainly did. He did a very good job with what he had. I think we all noticed the improvement in Sander Fagerson last year in the scrum. He's got to take some credit for that, as does Petrus du Plessis, who is, of course, unfortunately going the other way. He's left Glasgow. Yeah,
that seems strange because that seems strange. I guess it's Danny Wilson coming in and wanting to appoint his own people, but Petrus du Plessis is quite a popular character around Scotstoun, and he'd certainly with the fans, and you would have thought he would be someone worth hanging around. And he's got a working relationship with Kelly Brown from the time at Saracens together. So that's maybe a surprise that he's been let go.
Yeah, it could have been a book balancing exercise. Not because I was just going to check there. I don't think he's been announced as going anywhere else. But no, like you said, obviously, very popular. He was always in the band. He was always an entertaining speaker. He's not tired of he likes a wee natter, does Petrus? So yeah, it's a bit of a surprise, but unless we hear anything else, maybe just got offered more money, somewhere else.
I mean, I think coming back to John DL then, I mean, he's been under-20s head coach, Sevens head coach. He was forwards coach of Melrose. So it's probably outside of Gregor Townsend, I guess. It's kind of showing that there is a pathway for Scottish coaches within the system. He had a sabbatical, I think, down at London Scottish as well, when there was that doomed relationship between the SRU and London Scottish for about a year and a half, and they sent him down there on a sabbatical to do it. So he's done the groundwork. And I mean, the under-20s, he had they had that win against Australia under him. And it's a difficult thing, the under-20s, isn't it? Because it's not the same as international coaching, because you've got a much more of a rota of players coming in and out all the time. So it's not the same. It's hard to kind of get consistency within the under-20s. And I think he'd moved on, hadn't he, when we got relegated? I don't think he was in charge at that point. But he's brought through a lot of the players that played with him when the under-20s were successful are playing for Edinburgh and Glasgow now, Sandy.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair point. It's and I suppose it's exactly the same, really. I suppose it's what's happening with Kelly Brown is that they're, although he's been down at Saracens, they have had him in and around, and it seems very much like it's almost like a ticking the boxes before he comes back into the fold, and be interesting to see maybe 2 or 3 years down the line where what his next step might be, and perhaps that is that conveyor belt that people will see over the next wee while, that we're trying to show that if you're Scottish and you're doing a decent job, you can be brought into the fold and move forward to bigger and better things. I mean, John Dale, yeah, I mean, for under 21s, that's very much the point, isn't it? It's a drop off. You know, if everybody you've got that year has been close to the finish, and then the next thing they're 2022, you're starting all over again, and probably with quite a few of them being, you know, well under the age 19, and I think that was part of the problem with the last World Cup when we did get relegated. Most of these guys were at the start of their under 21s kind of cycle, if you like, and maybe will do a better job next year. I mean, in fact, you could see that already from the Six Nations. Who did a better job already. There was an improvement there from the World Cup. So,
I suppose the question is, Ian, why did Danny Wilson go across to Glasgow, and why didn't John Dale step up into the Glasgow head coach role then? I mean, I appreciate Danny Wilson's got previous head coach experience. Maybe there was just, you know, nobody wanted to take the gamble, but it seems odd to do that kind of swap in a way, I guess.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the first one there. I think maybe it was a lack of head coach experience, particularly at pro level for John Dale. Maybe would be what put them off. And then possibly the fact that economic circumstances have changed somewhat might have stilted Danny Wilson's, Townsend's options about who to bring in as a forwards coach.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an element of that. I think that, and this isn't to play down John Dale. I think it's a great appointment, and then certainly he comes from, you know, his background's good, and he's always been very successful in whatever job he's been given to do. But there is an element that Scotland have been left flat-footed after the World Cup in terms of the preparations and going forward. You know, to lose, we lost Dave Rennie, and then you lose your defence coach, and then to lose Matt Taylor. And then, you know, Danny Wilson moving to Glasgow. It's all, a lot of the other countries did their business very short, did a very quick review after the World Cup and did their business very, very swiftly. I think probably the merry-go-round at Australia didn't help because that probably delayed things a little bit. But I mean, Sam, do you think perhaps, you know, that there could have been a quicker review at post-World Cup of the coaching structure within Scotland? Or, you know, that would have kind of avoided being. You couldn't have foreseen COVID, of course, but that might have kind of prepared us for things a bit sooner.
Yeah, and I think that's you've hit the nail right on the head. I mean, if they'd realised that the world was going to change, turn on its axis in the next 6 months after that, they would maybe have got everything done a bit quicker. I mean, I think that's just circumstance rather than anything else. Could they have done it sooner? Well, obviously they could have done, because they would have had it done by now. But I can only assume that there was good reason that we're not privy to, that they wasn't done as a knee-jerk reaction to a poor World Cup. They wanted to let the dust settle and see how maybe potentially how we were going in the Six Nations before making too many changes. I mean, by the time the World Cup was over, most of us were thinking that Townsend's time was fairly close to an end, and I mean, he's obviously survived. So perhaps it was a kind of, they were left, the powers that we were left tapping their feet, wondering what are we going to do, and left in a wee bit of indecision because of they weren't sure about the head coach. Never mind everybody else underneath them.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, I just very quickly, because I want to come back to alternatives to John Dale, just a bit of a fun exercise, is that Mike Blair's been given a job title. Did you spot this in the press release? This was without fanfare. So Mike Blair has been the skills coach, always been listed as skills coach. Mike Blair is now Scotland's attack coach.
Yeah, I did see that.
Now, you know, there has been a rugby podcast pushing for a specific attack coach within Scotland. So I'm not saying that we we wield that influence, but clearly we do. That's because of us. So Mike Blair, if he's getting more money, I think he should pass on a cut to us.
Well, at least a $5 for a Patreon.
I say you should at least go for the £5 Patreon for that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that because he was skills coach, and there was I think, you know, Townsend had spoke about how attack was down to him and Blair, so maybe it is just a relabeling of a role he was already doing. But it's interesting nonetheless, Ian, that relabeling's happened.
Yeah, I always wondered, like, skills coach. I mean, what does that entail exactly? Because is he going to be teaching them how to kick? No, because not everyone's going to kick. Skills is a pretty vague. Got catching and passing.
Catching. Well, I don't know. There's been times when we could do help skill coaching and catching.
I mean, I think if you need a coach specifically for catching and passing, you're maybe you've fallen off the cliff already. But no, like you said, we have been calling out for someone to specifically look at attacking game plans and how to break a team down rather than Townsend trying to do all of it. But we've heard about his his big old playbook and what have you. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was something. There was an interview with Stuart Lancaster recently where he was talking about his role at Leinster and the fact that when he was at England, the thing he said to Eddie Jones when he took over is get a team manager, and because otherwise you'll be left with all this other stuff to deal with and you won't get a chance to get out on the paddock. And I wonder if there's been an element of that with Gregor Townsend, kind of realization post World Cup that, he's, as head coach, your role is not, you can't just dedicate your entire time to attack. You have so many other roles to fulfill as a head coach, and now he needs to delegate that. And he can dabble, he can direct, he can, put forward his view, but it's hard. I think it's hard as a head coach, I would imagine, just to be purely focused on one area, Sandy.
Yeah, and the question for me is who's pushing that change? Is that Gregor himself that's saying I need help, or is it perhaps his management saying, well, it's clearly not working maybe as well as it could do with the division of labour and doing it for him, which and I suppose it would need to be with his consent, otherwise he wouldn't want to hang about. But you're kind of it's maybe just a realization that as you said, that he can't do it all without some help.
I suppose they've got Malander. He's got Jim Malander in there. It's not quite clear how that's structured because under Scott Johnson was the big boss, and the international coach reported to Scott Johnson that the new repurposed director of rugby role that Jim Malander is in seems to be much more of a level at the same level as international coach. So it's not somebody that answers to. It's more somebody that is a willing ear that can be bent. Yeah, when needed. So whether or not he's had some influence over that and has kind of given the nudge and said, "Have you thought about this?"
Yeah, and that you would hope that would be the way that had been done rather than here you go, because that's not gonna work too well.
Jim Malander going, have you heard this podcast? Boys have been banging on about getting an attack coach. That's my Jim Malander impression. That's all you're getting.
And very good it was too.
Thank you. The Thistle lads from the other podcast, they were tweeting out saying, were there other options possibly out there? I've done a list, so just for funsies, so we'll go through it. So a lot of these, it's very much the horse had already bolted, so it wasn't really an option. So your top options are going to be Steve Borthwick, who signed for Leicester shortly after the World. I think before that was just after the World Cup. He went to Leicester early this year. I think he was signed for them because he was on England duty. So that's England forwards coach. Matt Proudfoot, who I think, former Scotland international, forwards scrum coach, I think, with South Africa, now England forwards coach. I think whether or not there were discussions there, we'll never know. No. But, he's with England now. Graham Roundtree's at Munster after being at with Georgia for a bit. There's Roddy Grant at Ulster now. Sandy, I'm keen on your view on this. Too early to bring Roddy Grant back from the cold?
I think for that job, yes. I mean, he's obviously. I assume he's doing a good job with Ulster because they're going pretty well. But I think I would like to see him eventually back at Edinburgh in some capacity before he moved on. And I think that would be a better path rather than just a better path, and to bring him back in before he went to Scott. Good guy, and definitely could do a job, assuming he's done from what he's done at Ulster and what he did at Edinburgh before he left. So I did wonder. I actually saw him not that long ago, and I wondered if that was him on the cusp of it.
Was that him? Did you see him down the cash and carry, Sandy?
Yeah, he was in Costco renewing his membership, so I thought he was maybe back.
I don't. Do they have a Costco in Belfast?
Well, I can't remember. I think I checked, and I think there was. So maybe he's just that was.
Maybe it's transferable.
Where he was on the day. Yeah.
Say the card's not store specific, is it? No.
No.
There you go. The other option then was Steve Laurie, and again, I think that probably comes down to you compare Steve Laurie to John Dalziel, and that's John Dale's got the more experience.
Yeah.
Here's one from left field. Ian, Alex Sanderson, the Saracens forwards coach. Now Saracens been relegated. Saracens have got a pretty formidable pack. They wouldn't have been relegated this season if they hadn't been diddling the books, allegedly. Or technically diddling them.
There's no allegedly about it. They've been diddling the books, and that's why they've been relegated.
Yeah. So that's. I'm surprised nobody's gone for it. Really, no clubs seem to have raided Saracens coaching staff, and I don't know if that's down to this kind of like Team Saracens, Fortress Wolfpack. We're all in it together. None of us are leaving.
Does the salary cap cover non-playing staff as well?
It probably doesn't. I think it's just playing stuff.
Yeah, I think it's
they've probably bought my house. But, of course, the other option, as is always shouted at these occasions, is Richie Gray, he's only gone to Fiji sort of semi-recently, hasn't he?
I think the thing is with Richie Gray, though, is Richie Gray he's
a hired gun.
He is. He's a consultant because he's got to raking in all the cash from all these inventions that he's constantly doing. I think is different ruck machines and scrum machines that he keeps inventing in his back garden. He's been he does. I think he's been over and done work with Miami Dolphins. He's in all sorts of different sports. I think the Fiji role probably suits him quite well because it means he can carry on doing all of his other stuff. And I think it probably would have been a big ask. I would imagine, to say to him, look, if you're going to come in and do the forwards coach role with Scotland, you're going to have to give up your Rhino stuff. You're going to have to give up your consultancy work in other sports. And that, to me, I would imagine is far more interesting. If you had the option of you can come and sit in Scotland and take the forwards through some drills in the rain and malls over and over again, or you can go out to Miami and do some work with the Miami Dolphins and go to Fiji for a couple of months of
maybe he hates the beach.
Sounds like a really hard life, that doesn't it?
It does.
I don't like the beach, so
Mine is he's frugalist, so I don't know how he copes with the heat. There's always that. I think he was probably always that. He did that. He did come in as a consultant under Vern Cotter, which is I think why he's obviously going with Fiji now. But he's listed as a kind of there on a consultancy basis, I think, rather than a permanent appointment with Fiji. The other one was Nathan Hines, who's out of work as a forwards coach after being let go out by Montpellier. I don't think he's signed up anywhere else.
That'd be
a good shout, yeah.
Would have been nice. I mean, he in the end there was. I think it was might have been Jamie Lyle did an interview with him on Rugby Pass about the kind of the way the coronavirus has hit the coaching market and the kind of a lot of guys uncertain. And he was saying his kids are desperate to get back to Scotland, but he's after the right project. So whether or not it wasn't the right fix, I would have thought even if not at an international level for the Glasgow job, Nathan Hines would have been. Has more experience than Kelly Brown. But again, as you said, Ian, whether or not that's finances.
Yeah, because Brown's only got experience with the Saracens unders, and obviously the sort of Scotland peripheries, whereas, maybe Hines, if, he's been at big money Montpellier, in a more senior role, so that's probably put them off, but I think he would have been a brilliant shout. Maybe a bit too expensive. Possibly.
The other last from left field was Chris Masso, who's defence coach of Racing 92, who's been let go. But again, I think I don't know how interchangeable these things are. I don't know if you can switch from being a defence coach to a forwards coach, and how easy that is, or how specialised you get. I would imagine switching from a specific role to head coach would be different, but I don't know how interchangeable those jobs are.
Yeah, because it's one of John Dale's jobs. Is one of his breakdown specialist. Is that not one of his kind of, or one of the areas?
I think it is. I think it is an area that he specialises in, which means it kind of complements Peter de Villiers as scrum coach.
Yeah, the set play.
Yeah. But I think when you go through that list, there's not really, and that's the list I came up with of, the top, you're kind of looking at the top candidates that aren't already taken or were available in or around the World Cup to be your forwards coach. And aside from Nathan Hines, who, would have been a good shout, you really then at Alex Sanderson, like you said, Ian, he's probably, if it's out with the salary cap, then I don't know about whether the SRU have got enough money to buy a house for somebody, or whether that's how it works.
What's the term again? They were after the AGM about the rebranding, but when Super 6 came in and they were sort of rejigging all the leagues, incidental benefits.
That's
it, incidental benefits, yeah.
Maybe the incidental benefits were often weren't enough to tear him away from the incidental benefits at Saracens.
Surprise,
where you set for, it's pretty much like being in the mafia. I'm not comparing them to the mafia, of course, but like being in the mafia, once you're in for life, and that's it. You kind of leave. You know where the bodies are. Buried, literally.
And once it's over, you sleep with the fishes, say with sharks.
Didn't he fancy waking up with a horse's head in his bed? That was why he didn't shift. And so I think once you go through the list of possibles, really you realise that John Dale was probably, I would say he's the candidate, but he's the most available and probably the best qualified to do it of those that you might have gone for, other than Nathan Hines. And I think probably then you're on a par. And as you say, Ian, he's coming for French money, so that's a step down.
We can't afford that French money.
No. The Kelly Brown then, you happy? Pleased with Kelly Brown coming back? I mean, he kind of left. I don't know, did he leave under a cloud for Glasgow? Because it was kind of, he was part of the Killer Bees and then they all broke up. I think Kelly Brown didn't. The other two certainly left under a cloud. I don't think Kelly Brown did, because he went out Saracens, didn't he? He was in and around the Scotland setup for more significantly longer time than the other two.
Yeah, Bark seems to have, been under the impression he was going to be offered a new contract and then wasn't. When that's the same time that Townsend was coming in. So Brown seems to be the only one who, like you said, left on seemingly amicable terms. But obviously, he was going, like you said, it was a step up to Saracens club that were really just starting to kick into gear there, and he's won European Cups and God knows how many Premiership titles. So obviously, hugely experienced, and Saracens conveyor belt of talent who they then paid too much to keep. But obviously, he's been part of that whole process there of all these good youngsters coming through. So obviously, it's something he's good at. Glasgow have got a young team. I mean, both Edinburgh and Glasgow have to sort of bring through young players. So it's obviously something he's accustomed to. And I'll be excited to see what he brings.
Yeah. Sandy, you jealous?
Because he has got qualities at played at the very highest level, as Ian's just said. So, it's a good sign, and you can't deny that, to be honest. If we'll just need to wait and see whether I need to be.
And some set of pipes on him as well.
Well, that's true. Needed after maybe that's it got doubly replacing Petrus.
I've just
for the band.
Dawned on me there. Yeah. Oh well.
What did Petrus do? Was Petrus no guitarist? Or was he?
Yeah, he played guitar.
Was it backing vocals or? Because Ryan Wilson's going to be in for he's in for a challenge then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
it's maybe not the same genres though. The band were more of a heavy rock kind of stuff. I'm not sure.
Maybe Ryan Wilson just comes in and does the rap parts. like John Barnes and World in Motion.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you that Peter Hook once sat on my face?
No.
Too much information.
I used to write for the student magazine. I was editor of the student magazine, and I got a chance to interview Peter Hook when he was DJing, and it was there was a 4-disc retrospective New Order album came out, and it's very good. If anyone is ever thinking of getting into New Order, that 4-disc retrospective is very good. It's got live stuff, remixes, and a best of. So I was back in the green room, and in fairness, I'd had a bit to drink, because I was young. I was a young man. I was 20 at the time, and I asked them if they would still be making the same music, or if they would have done the music New Order did if Ian Curtis hadn't died. I put quite sensitively, like, and then he just got really angry and started sort of asking me what I was trying to say. What are you trying to say with this in your Poxy Student magazine? And then climbed on top of me and kind of pinned me to the sofa. And then Clint Boone had to pull him off me. It was a very surreal experience. He did it twice during the interview.
I really feel like we should have known this about you sooner, Cammy.
No, and then I only mention it because you mentioned World Emotion. So he kind of hugged me after. It was very straight. I think if I'd been a woman, this would have been me telling my Me Too story. But we went up to, he was DJing. I say DJ, and he was kind of stood waving at the crowd while Clint Boone was playing records. And they played World in Motion because that's what they do in these appearances. They just basically play your best of while loads of drunk people pay double the amount they normally pay on an indie night to get in to see you. And they played World in Motion, and I decided to call it a night. And I told him I hated it because I was Scottish. And he said, I hate it too. And so we left on good terms. Yeah.
Excellent.
We left on good terms. So I've still got the copy of the magazine in case Peter Hook's listening to this and decides to sue me for defamation of saying he sat on my face. I've still got a copy of the magazine from the time where I wrote it up.
With photographic evidence.
I haven't got photographic evidence, but I think timely evidence.
If we're going for it, though, I'd have to say that New Order were probably the worst band I've ever seen, to be honest.
Have you seen them live, Sandy?
Yeah, I saw them at, back in the day, what it would have been 84.
That's early doors, isn't it?
At the Cali Pally in Lothian Road. I went with my mate. He was a big New Order fan. On the condition he came with me to see the Boomtown Rats next week. So, and don't get me wrong, they're a good band, but they weren't exactly the most dynamic to watch on stage.
No, I think they were notorious as well for being up and down with their gigs as well. I've never seen them live, but I know you can go to an absolutely amazing New Order gig and then also go to if they're just not bothered, sometimes they can also be absolutely pish as well.
Yeah, my recollection was they were good. It's just it wasn't exactly engaging.
Well, I would imagine not. It's not the kind of, I don't think Bernard Sumner's isn't he the kind of guy to be kind of sliding across the stage on his knees, is he?
No,
like no. Three people behind keyboards and a drummer. Well, a light show, effectively, I'd imagine.
In fact, I know I'm digressing, but I'm pretty sure, you know how sometimes the support act has got a tiny wee corner of the stage and they're not allowed to come out of that wee bit because obviously some of the equipment's set up for the main act. That was what it was like New Order were on that. They stuck to about a quarter of the stage and didn't move out of it. So.
Well, there you go.
Maybe the rest of the stage was lava. They were playing a game.
That sounds plausible.
I think we'll move on after that digression. Yeah. The other big news, just literally as we were on air, so to speak, last week, there was an article landed on Rugby Pass by Jamie Lyle, where he'd interviewed Matt Smith about the reason why he'd retired from rugby. Now, I'll do a bit of a warning before we go into this. Matt Smith talked about his struggles with his mental health. So if it's not something you're comfortable listening to, that's absolutely fair enough. You can skip ahead this part if that's what you want to do. The article as well, I will warn you, if you haven't read it, it's a tough read. It goes into quite a lot of detail about Matt Smith's some of his darkest thoughts, some of the things he thought about doing to himself. It's not the sort of stuff you would normally get. 'Cause normally, it would be it would breach the editorial code on reporting this kind of stuff. However, having said that, I think the way that it's written by Jamie is very powerful. I think because mental health is something that we need to discuss more openly, and by kind of, I guess, soften it around the edges, sometimes we kind of lose the impact on the way that it has on people's lives. So fair play to Jamie. I think it's a very powerful article, and absolutely fair play to Matt Smith for the courage it took to talk to Jamie and to put that out there. The thing that came away from it, and like I said, go and read the article if you're able to. Like I said, it is, I will warn people, it is quite dark in places. The main thing that came away from it, though, is and this is the worry, and I think you've probably both got quite different takes on this. Perhaps the lack of support, or the seeming lack of support within the SRU for players' mental health. That's what it kind of seems to uncover. And there's two parts to that, and I think it's probably best to kind of break it down. We'll maybe go to coach in second, I think, because that comes later in the interview. But the first thing is this kind of the fact he talks about how he felt, but there was no one to go to talk about this within the SRU. That the mental health guy, as he calls them, comes in once a week to Glasgow and sits in the coach's room, and you have to go and see him. If you've got a problem, you've got to go and see the mental health guy in the coach's room. Now, that means walking past the coaches and walking past everyone else. Everyone knows he's in there. And so it's almost an admission of some sort of flaw that you've got, or an admission of weakness that you've got to do that. I mean, that I'll start with you. That doesn't seem like it's fit for purpose.
No, it certainly doesn't. Because although we talk about trying to end the stigma around mental health, obviously there still is the stigma. That's the whole fact that we have to talk about stopping the stigma is the fact that it exists. And Matt Smith obviously felt that it was too strong for him. The label would be attached to him that there was something wrong with him, and he didn't want that being public knowledge, which I think is fair enough. Not everybody does want to, or certainly to begin with, they might not be comfortable airing what it is that's troubling them. So it certainly doesn't seem fit for purpose. He does admit as well at one point, he had a doctor's appointment booked, but he couldn't face to go. But that's one of the things with depression is you just don't have any energy to go and do such a thing. You make that first step. It's enough. It takes enough effort to make that first step, to make the call to say, yes, I am going to go see a doctor. Then by the time it comes, you might be at a real low point, and then you can't be bothered. So no, I certainly think, especially with the high-profile nature of the game and whatnot, and because of the atmosphere and the stigma attached, there should be a sort of anonymous service for the players. Hopefully, they've got the Rugby for Life, which is being run by Bernard Teaguff. He was Edinburgh, wasn't he? Aye.
Yeah.
From Edinburgh, man.
Yep.
And also Rugby Players Scotland. The organisation started by Tim Swinson, which has got Grant Gilchrist and Harley in it. Hopefully, they'll be able to instigate changes, but it's something that we've been saying for quite some time now, and it just seems to keep happening. And it's now that's a couple of very young players that have semi-recently, or in the case of Matt Smith, very recently, had to retire because Kieran Lowe had to retire as well recently because of all of his issues. So it is part of a very worrying trend.
And I guess we've had a couple of players. I mean, I know Alex Dunbar's talked about it. We've had Stuart McInally talking about how he struggled after the World Cup, Sandy. It's not... Yeah. It does... We've talked before on the podcast, and we're flipping about this. We've managed to get them to change Mike Blair's job title to attack coach. So hopefully, if we keep going on about this, we might get some change. But we've talked for a while about the fact that Scotland don't appear to have a mental skills coach in the same way that the All Blacks have with Gilbert and Oka, who oversees their things. They don't really have a permanent guy overseeing all of this, or a permanent person. It's a guy, but permanent person overseeing the mental well-being of players within the system, be that at international level, be it at pro level, or even in the academies. In an ideal world, you want someone at the top overseeing then maybe a couple of guys in the academies and a couple of guys in the pro teams that are doing this on a full-time basis. And that it is anonymous, that the players can, feel able to go and quietly see somebody without anybody knowing and just saying, I'm struggling, I've got a problem, and seeking support. Yeah,
I mean, first and foremost, I think it's almost impossible for someone who doesn't have, doesn't feel this way to actually understand exactly what it does to you. I think that's first and foremost. But I think that there's obviously been some steps taken towards bringing in people to help with players' mental health. But as you've already said, not making it anonymous. And to be honest, I would also say it should be compulsory and off-site, so that, it doesn't need to be that everybody's going to have a big long session every month with a mental health professional. But if the going becomes normal, then just because that's what you're expected to do, then and nobody's going to be able to challenge you because you've all got to go. You're all going to be there, and none of that gets reported back to the club or to Scotland. That can only help everybody, and I think that's probably the key how this has been done. As I say, good to see that there's some stuff being done, and Matt had sort of said that, as you've alluded to in the article anyway, that there was help. He just didn't feel that he was able to access it because of it, and I think that's partly, I suspect, without being a mental health professional, that this is probably tied up, particularly or exacerbated by the performance culture that's within any professional sport. If and particularly one where like rugby is, that your contracts are only maybe 1, 2, 3 years at a top, and that if you don't, you're always expected to be performing, and if you don't, that you could be gone and not get a contract. I think, unfortunately, not that it's hugely relevant here, but I think Matt Smith was just a victim of circumstance to a large degree. Wasn't thought to be wanted at Glasgow. Obviously, didn't work out at Edinburgh, and because of the things that happened in the world, there probably weren't too many other places he could go to be a professional rugby player, whether he wanted to or not. But that's the two things are probably very are not easy to untangle from each other.
I guess there is an element of this, Ian, that's kind of like a byproduct of the way that Scotland are set up. That we have these really large squads, professional squads, and I mean the Super Six come along, and maybe that might give longer term, and especially in light of coronavirus and the way that they're now talking about you linking Super Six and the pro teams a bit more closely, this might not be so much of an issue. But you have got a lot of guys who every week are waiting to have their name on the team sheet. And they get their chance during the Six Nations and the autumn internationals, and that's it. And even they play really well during that period. And Matt Smith's one of those players. We've seen everyone said Matt Smith had potential. Matt Smith was a phenomenal back rower, but he plays well in the autumn, and then all the lads come back from it's the 1872 Cup. All the lads are back from international duty, and all of a sudden bin juice, I've heard it referred to. You're back holding the pads again.
Yeah, that's exactly something I've written down. Is this a byproduct of only having the two professional sides, and also like what Sandy was saying, being a victim of circumstance. It just so happened that one of the most expensive imports that Glasgow have had over recent years was playing in Matt Smith's position, in Callum Gibbons. And also, I don't think you're going to find a fan or player or anyone involved at Glasgow who would not speak highly of Gibbons, both as a person and as a player. So Smith was really handcuffed there in that aspect. But other than that, it's a great shame to lose him. But like you said as well, dropping down to Super Six, if he's been playing and training with professionals, with international standard guys, you're told, sorry, you're not good enough this week. Again, you're going down to Super Six, and with no disrespect to Super Six, but that's meant to be a pathway up.
Yeah,
it's not it's not a reserve league.
There was an article in the Telegraph this week about bin juice, which is the if people don't know what bin juice is, it's the term that's used in rugby clubs for it's your kind of guys that hold the pads. It's the guys that are kind of like second or even third or fourth choice. They're the ones that kind of come in and do the extras. They're the ones that clean the boots. And James Haskell, and for my sins, I agreed with something he said. I don't know. A stop clock is right twice a day, isn't it? And he was talking about the kind of what's he said. Steve Borthwick, he said, was very good at dealing with bin juice players, but really kind of being very frank with them about what their place in the team was. He said whether it be the other guys, you'd go to forwards coach and he'd say, I'm in the team meeting fighting for you. You know, I'm the one that's pushing for you to be in. It's not down to me. And then you keep never getting selected in it to eventually realise, well, he's not speaking up for me in a meeting. He said, but Steve Borthwick was always very honest. He'd always tell you where you were in the grand scheme of things. He said he was the one that, in the Lions tour, they're talking to them about, where they were in the place and where they were, where their place was within that setup. And I don't know how much it comes down to then culture. Then that there's that element of it as well. Is one, it's not a culture where you're maybe free to speak up, and that you're supposed to be a hardened player, and also that you've got two coaches, as Matt Smith says, you've got two coaches in Dave Rennie and Richard Cockrell telling you your chance will come, you're going to get a chance, you're going to do it. Any day now, you're going to be the one starting. And I don't know how then, destructive that message, for all the good intentions of that message, Sandy, how over time, how destructive that can become to somebody.
Yeah, and if you're everybody's fragile when it comes to your own ego, and if you're already susceptible in some fashion, that's going to hurt. I mean, I think everybody's not been chosen for something they wanted, they thought they should have been chosen for, and then you magnify that 100 times to as a 12-year-old, 13, 14-year-old, you wanted to be a professional rugby player. You became a professional rugby player, but then never entered the field. Even the strongest, or I don't want to say strongest and weakest because that sounds pejorative, but I'm lacking better words to use. So even the strongest person will be suffer from thinking that they deserve a shot and not getting it. What should they tell them? I mean, I think you're right. Honesty's got to be the best policy, but I suppose they're serving two. They've got to try and keep all their players happy, and B, they've got to try and pick the best players and pick the team that they want to win. It's to a certain extent we're not talking about participation. Everybody's got to get a shot. It's professional sport. I just think they need to be better looked after, as we've already said. I think and that's probably not necessarily the coach's job to all the time be cognizant of how somebody's feeling, because their job's to get the best out of them and the best on the field. I think that probably needs to be someone else, as we've already said.
Yeah, just before I come to you now, I just wanted to play this. This is a clip from YouTube of Steve Hansen, Aaron Smith, and Steve Hansen talking prior to the third place playoff at the World Cup about mental health, and it's really interesting. There's a couple of points I want to pick up on afterwards, but this is them being asked about young men with mental health issues in New Zealand and how the team cope with that. That's Ian pointing out that we can't hear it, which means I've pressed the wrong button. I was looking at both of your faces. I was looking at both of your faces, thinking, I really hope I was waiting for the cut sign.
I was just messaging you there when you sent it through. Like, can you hear this? And nope.
Nope, I can't. Right,
let's try and just delete. I can't hear this too.
I can't hear this too. Right. Well, we'll try that. We'll try that again. I pressed the wrong button. I know what I've done wrong. So we'll try this.
If we can't hear it again, we'll get that.
You can get the whole cut sign. Let's try it. Let's try that
like
again.
A hacker.
Maybe not. We'll try that again anyway. Here we go.
There's just been a lot of talk these days about mental health in society, and just want to go back to something Richie just mentioned before about his mental state. Obviously, you're a bunch of guys this week who are, gone through something pretty traumatic. Is there any advice or anything you've learnt this week about being in a group for perhaps young men in New Zealand about dealing with this sort of stuff and being able to communicate with one another?
I think for us it started at the review. Coach asked us all individually how we were feeling. There was a lot of pain there was a lot of honesty. You got grown men pouring their hearts out, and that's showing real massive vulnerability. Whether that would have happened a while back, maybe not. But I know Coach pushes it pretty hard in our leadership meetings. We have them after every week to check where each person's at. People that aren't selected, people that are on different scales. But, I think we just really care about each other a lot. We check in on each other. You can see people having the little combos. I'm really proud of our boys to show the emotion they did. A lot of people won't know what was seen in the changing room or what we did on Monday and how honest we are and that to each other and with each other. And to sometimes be that honest in a really tough situation it's hard to take. But we all did it and probably left the room feeling a lot better. Not happy, but better. And it's still there, still hurts. But as we've just said, we've got a great opportunity tomorrow to make sure we go into the summer with a better feeling. And one more chance to play rugby this year. That fizzes me up, so can't wait.
Can I add to that? Because I think, it is a massive problem in New Zealand. And our biggest problem is that we don't give those people that are struggling the permission to say they're struggling. We think we have to hide it. And as a result of hiding it, it bottles up, and then it's like a big volcano, isn't it? When it gets too hot, it blows. And, our job as parents, as work colleagues, is to support the people. But first of all, you've got to know that they need the support. And to know that, you've got to know your people. And then you've got to allow them to be vulnerable. And it takes a lot to be vulnerable, because how people react to your vulnerability is either going to allow you to do it again or it's going to shut you down. So giving them permission, I think, is the key, and then letting them just be vulnerable. And, it's no different in sport, families or work. We've got to do it better than we're doing it.
So that was Steve Hansen and Aaron Smith talking about mental health in rugby. I think that's the key thing I picked up from that. It kind of just stuck in my head because I'd seen it at the time during the World Cup, that interview and that press conference. This idea of creating a culture where it's okay to be vulnerable and when you've got to know your people. And there is an element, I think, Ian, from what Matt Smith has said is, and again, it comes back to, I don't know whether this is because there are too many people to get to know from a coaching point of view, that, to have somebody come and say something as powerful as what Matt Smith has said. And this isn't just kind of like playing around the edges or feel a bit sad in the corner. This is quite significant stuff he's come out with that fundamentally, and I know, Ali Price has come out and said he's close to Matt Smith. He didn't know any of this, but there can't have been a culture where people were allowed to talk about that kind of stuff. And there clearly isn't a culture where the people internally know their people. So something fundamentally is wrong within, whether that's Glasgow, whether it's the SRU as a whole, something fundamentally is wrong.
I'm not sure if it's fundamentally wrong, but I think in the cases of Matt Smith, he has he seems to be, he's been an extreme case of depression. He's talked about, I don't know, I think this is why you put the warning in, but there was talk of considering suicide and what have you. But I'm not sure if I wouldn't say it's an organisational failure, or certainly not. I don't think there's enough evidence to say that. He obviously just wasn't comfortable with it. Some people are comfortable saying they've got issues. He wasn't, and whether that is an organisational thing or just a personal thing to him, we don't know. Because that's the thing, in the article it says, he puts on the happy face. Ali Price said he was, always close pals with. He thought he was close pals with him, and he never noticed anything. Matt Smith and Adam Hastings seemed to have a very good sort of friendship. Some of their Twitter interaction was borderline, a bit close to the edge. But yes, I don't think we can definitively say that it's a total organisational issue and that the players aren't caring enough. But that's things like depressed people, they get good at hiding stuff, and Matt Smith was good at hiding it. But obviously, I do think that a lot more can be done by the SRU. I mean, for example, like if you take Glasgow and Edinburgh, you've got a squad of, put those two first team squads together, what's that, 90 people?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So if you've got a full-time psychiatrist, you can do like 1 hour a month per player. That'd be 90 hours in a month. That's more than... Yeah, if you're looking at a 38-hour working week, you times that by 5, that's more than achievable. But yeah, so like Sandy was saying, you make it the norm rather than something, oh wait, you need to go and speak to the psychiatrist. Oh God, we need to pick up the bat phone and ring them.
Set off an alarm and let everybody know where you're going.
I suppose it just is
like a cowbell.
Like it's something that becomes part and parcel of everyday life, and not just. I mean, it's interesting what Aaron Smith was talking about there. It's not just you go your weekly session with a psychiatrist or mental health skills coach. That it's also open discussions that you're having with your peers as well. That it becomes something that's talked about very openly, and guys who are struggling are able to say they're struggling without someone saying, oh, you're just crazy, or get over it.
Up.
Aye, that's it. That it's acknowledged in it that there is a dialogue about it, and I think that's what seemed to be absent from what Matt Smith was saying. That I can completely understand why someone wouldn't be able to walk into the coach's room to see the mental health guy, but at the same time, the fact that he didn't feel able to do that would speak of a culture where it was. It was frowned upon that you do that.
Yeah, and I think we acknowledge that they definitely need to do better. But I mean, even from that clip with Hansen and Smith there just now, I mean, on one hand, Steve Hansen saying there's a problem in New Zealand, and on the other hand, Aaron Smith saying, well, yeah, but we're all right. We managed to talk to each other. So there's a bit of a split in. I mean, you would expect him to say that. He's not going to sit there and say that all my teammates are depressed and nobody's telling me and I'm left out. But it's clearly not necessarily just a problem for the SRU, or it's a problem for society at large. And I think if we want to try and address it for rugby, then it needs to be done. Better. And your teammates here, they can go so far. The friends, you can go so far, but as Ali Price said, you don't always necessarily, and as Ian even reiterated, you don't know what somebody else is thinking. So the only way to get to that is by anonymous, or not necessarily anonymous, but private time with a private counsellor who's not then reporting back to an employer, so that by the time that you've done it for a couple of seasons, that they're actually to a certain extent joking about it in the changing room. Whose turn is it to go and see the shrink this week?
Yeah.
And so that it's not even to even say, well, it's me, I've got to go. They might be spilling their guts when they're there, or they might just be having a conversation about the weather. But at least then they've got a chance to do that in a private setting where nobody can destroy what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I suppose that then builds into creating a culture where it's okay to speak openly about the fact you're not feeling yourself and you're not feeling right, and and that you're not going to be shot down for saying something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hopefully we've put a few feelers and hopefully we'll come back to this issue, and we're hoping to try and speak to a couple of people with a bit more expertise on this as an issue within rugby, because of course it's not just the professional teams, it's something that affects us all. As Sandy was saying, it's something that affects society at large, and and it is going to be something that affects teams at all levels. And so we're going to try and get some people on the podcast to talk about that in future. I don't mean this to sound flippant in any way. We are going to shift on to something else, and I'm going to play a jingle just to lighten the mood. So we'll go with this and see how this goes. That's the wrong one. I played the wrong jingle.
Do we need to turn our cameras off or anything?
No, you're right.
That's
Keep
right,
your cameras
cool.
on. Do you know what? I'll see if I can get the right jingle playing this time.
While you do that, I'll just confirm Rory Jackson is backs coach. He's going to be player coach at Glasgow Ackies.
Oh, how exciting for him. So we'll go with this. I've got the right one now. I'll share. Here we go.
Well, we looked high and we looked low, seen Dougie Bop on in the speedos, but I just wanna know, did you see the legend that's Dougie Donnelly?
Well, there you go. It's the Where's Dougie Donnelly section of the podcast where we ask you to get in touch with anyone that you have seen out and about in the wild. We've had one this week from Alan Tanner who said that he saw Kelly Brown on Portobello Prom in Edinburgh last week. He looked very jolly. Well, we know why now, don't we? He'd obviously just taken,
Glasgow.
That's it. He'd taken the phone call, hadn't he?
Or he'd sold his Saracen's house.
We've already had yours, Sandy, haven't we? That you saw Roddy Grant and Costco.
Yeah, that was a wee while back, but yeah, I don't have another one, I'm afraid.
Oh well, that's it. So that was. I don't know. The jingle was longer than the actual Where's Dougie Donnelly there, but we'll go with it anyway.
I did forget a bit of news that we didn't mention earlier on. It's not.
I'll go on then.
Huge import, but I noted today, as you might have done, that Fife Dougie has joined new. I need to check this thing. A New England Free Jacks. You've got to be careful how you say that one.
Right. There's an interesting thing with this because they called him. This is the new. I've got to find this on Twitter because the announcement was not
dual code.
That's how they called him. He. How did they describe Dougie Fife? And it was not the way I would have described him. They said he's a versatile and explosive back three player. I mean, that's fair. They said there was something else. They had a different. The excitement machine. That's what they called him. They called him the excitement machine.
All right.
I don't think I've heard him called that before.
Their own the Free Jacks Twitter page was very excited. To be fair, so. Well,
I mean, it's fairly high profile for what for
a club I've never heard of.
MLR. It's interesting with the American market, isn't it? I mean, Old Glory. You would have thought he might have gone to Old Glory.
Yeah.
Given that the SRU connection, but
maybe the SRU are fed up with giving him money.
No money to give anymore. So yes, Dougie Fife is off to America. It's about the only country apart from Australia and New Zealand. It's the only country playing any rugby at the minute. Not necessarily safely, but there you go. The excitement machines. Well, there you go.
Poland seems to be playing rugby. Or
Russia.
Belarus. Belarus didn't stop playing football, so
maybe they carried on with rugby as well.
Germany probably.
Well,
do they have a professional league in Germany?
I don't think they have a professional. They've got a millionaire that I know they've got a millionaire that bankrolls the national team in Germany.
And they've got amazing looking 7 stops.
Yeah. We'll move on. Let's do this last one. See if I can get this one to work now. I'll check this actually works. Why does it jump to that? It never jumps to the one I wanted to jump to. Let's jump to a different screen altogether. Here we go.
Hands in the rock, who has got their hands in the rock? Hands in the rock, hands in the rock, who has got their hands in the rock?
So yes, it is Hands in the Rock. It's our Any Other Business section of the podcast. We've had one in on Twitter this week, which is from Michael. It's Mikey S. And this was in response. I tweeted earlier there was a Rugby World Cup official Twitter account posted Freddie Michalak scoring against Scotland at the Rugby World Cup in 2003, and Gregor Townsend slips off quite an easy tackle and there's very little to track back to stop him. I said I would like to have seen the 10 make more of an effort to get back and cover the tackle. I wonder what happened to him. But as Mikey points out, every highlight clip either starts with a try against Scotland or is a disproportionate amount of tries against Scotland. But as he points out, we were awful in the 2000s, so I think that we've only got ourselves to blame there.
Yeah.
Plenty to choose from.
Sandy, can I start with you? What's your hands in the ruck this week? Have you got one?
I don't have anything specific, but I was just thinking. I was thinking about Scottish-born Finlay Christie.
Oh, yes.
Finlay, apparently, he's Scottish.
Who knew?
Who knew?
It's that time of year, isn't it? This time of year, when the Super Rugby season starts, everyone goes, "Who's that ginger lad? I wonder if he's Scots qualified." Oh, it's Finlay Christie.
Wait, what's his name? He must be Scottish.
It's like they forgot from Super Rugby last year and the year before and the year before that.
And the Lions tour as well.
Yeah. Come on. The only thing I noticed about him, he's collecting Super Rugby franchises like top trumps cards at the moment, as young Mr. Christie, to be honest.
It's the only thing I think that goes in his favour, that he's not really settled in one team. He scored 2 tries at the weekend, and they're both exceptionally well taken. We won the support lines with something up the George Horn playbook.
Yeah, it was good.
He's only 24. I think there was someone sent me an article from New Zealand saying he's not set. There's been contact from Scotland. He's not quite settled on where he wants to go. I think we can't blame him. We can't blame him for wanting to change. You know, if anybody who says that they would choose Scotland over the All Blacks for an international career if they were able to is either lying or a fool.
Yes, indeed. Was that the same article, the New Zealand Herald one, that the headline described them as being stellar, but in the body of the text said he was a journeyman?
That's just standard New Zealand reporting, isn't it, Sandy? But no, I mean, I think I'm for one surprised that he's not at Edinburgh yet. I think that there's enough prospects at Glasgow, but I'm saying Edinburgh would seem to be a reasonable destination for a 24-year-old promising scrum half.
Well, that was the same thing, and I saw that, and I think he's actually 25, and he'll be 26 in September. Now that doesn't make him, past it by any manner of means, but he's actually older than George Horn and roughly the same age as Ali Price, and all the other kind of up and coming scrum halves in Scotland are all 19, 20 and such like. So it's.
I suppose the question is he better than what Edinburgh already have? I suppose from a Scotland point of view, if you say he's the same age, roughly the same age as Ali Price, older than George Horn, so that puts him in at third or pushing second choice for Scotland. Is he better than what Edinburgh have, and to have as a third choice for Scotland?
I mean, that's hard to say. He's obviously a different player than the two that are there, plays in a different way. But although I've seen him play well, I'm not. I think the fact that he's been to so many different franchises would tend to suggest that he's perhaps not seen as somebody that's. And maybe he's matured to the point where this is where he's going to get his regular start. But I don't think he'd started 3 games in a row for any franchise before Super Rugby after
Was he behind Aaron Smith somewhere though? I think he's been behind a couple of big. I think he might be TJ as well. So he's behind the 2 first choice All Blacks. So it's not. That's a hard. I mean,
perhaps a good apprenticeship. In fairness,
I was going to say there's a difference between shifting Ali Price's first choice of Glasgow and Henry Purgos, but there's and then the shifting Aaron Smith and TJ Perenara. Ian, it's do we need to up our ginger quota for Scotland because he is a redhead?
It's pretty low, because Rob Harley doesn't get picked. Do we have any standout gingers?
I don't think so. No.
No. No. I mean, sorry, what was it?
I was just going to say, if there was one Blues player we could we not have Hoskins Sototu?
Yeah,
is he a redhead?
No, unfortunately not.
No, but he's not been capped by the All Blacks yet, so we can get him on the residency.
Aye.
So there we go. Him and Will Jordan. Don't think he's been capped yet.
Yeah, no,
he has been capped. Will Jordan was the famous example of someone calling themselves SRU Scout, I think, on YouTube, accidentally liking or saving the video or adding it
That's
to a
right.
playlist.
Oh, that's right. He was that one, wasn't
And
he?
he was like 17 or something, and everyone got excited that Will Jordan was coming to Scotland. I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
No.
No.
You'll be an All Black fairly shortly, I would think.
Yeah. Ian, what's your hands in the ruck?
Mine is, I mean, we've kind of discussed this before, but it's the outcome of the Exeter Chiefs review into their branding and name. Now, obviously, we've gone over this. We don't have an issue with the name, but it's the branding. So what they've decided to do is they've retired the mascot, Big Chief, who is a dude walking about in a stereotypical red Indian, like a cowboy and Indian costume. So they're getting rid of him, but they're keeping the logo, which also contains, Native American imagery. They're not going to change the name of the Pow Wow Bar. And
they're not going to discourage fans from doing the tomahawk chop.
The tomahawk chop, yeah.
I can just show people, for people that don't know, I'm happy. I can share my screen. Here we go. I'll make this work. Here's Big Chief. There he is in all his glory. I think they have retired him, but whether you should have had someone there with there's a blatant caricature of First Nation Americans is I don't think it's questionable. You shouldn't have done it.
No, it's not questionable.
Unbelievable that
crass.
In 2020 that something like that has happened.
I mean, I've said this on Twitter. I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast, but I remember the first time hearing the Chiefs doing the war chant, and you heard just like, was that Scotstoun? It was the first time Exeter had been up or had really seen Exeter play, and they start doing the war chant. And you're just like, that's racist, is.
Yeah.
And
it's also incredibly annoying as well.
That too, it's like vuvuzelas.
Aye, on both levels.
Annoying and racist. Could it get any worse?
Yeah. So the official line is we've dropped the Big Chief mascot, but and the audacity of what they said in the letter, which was we have had ethnic groups visit us before, and none of them have raised an issue with it. Now, they didn't say we've had, First Nation people come to us and visit the club and they've not got an issue with it. It was just we've had people from ethnic minorities visit the club before.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not the same as, just because you've met some people from different ethnic minorities who haven't had raised an issue with the other ethnic minority you're caricaturing doesn't make it okay. Did you ask them, or was it just they were were they just passing?
Should we club together then to see if we can get some cash to get some Native Americans to turn up and tell them in person if that's the only way it's going to work?
The thing is, they've written to them.
Yeah.
There's if anybody hasn't listened to Lee from the Blood and Mud podcast has interviewed two women from Canada. I want to get the name of this right, so I'm going to find it. It's the Iroquois Roots Rugby, and it's well worth listening if you've got the time. It's a 40-minute podcast because for once Lee doesn't go off at tangents because I don't think the Iroquois Roots Rugby would be into going off at tangent with what's on the telly or music.
Their favourite X Factor person is.
Yeah. So it's a very good interview. They touch on it for very briefly, but it's talking about how they're using rugby and spreading it around the different tribes in Canada and how they came to rugby and what positive sport they see it at. But they also talk about how much it lets them down that this happened to Exeter Chiefs. And they wrote to Exeter Chiefs, they wrote to the chief exec and said, we think this is a problem. And they didn't even receive an acknowledgement of that letter. So to carry on and say, we believe, if I was in charge of the PR, and I'm not, even if you had a CEO who was absolutely hell-bent on keeping the branding, and they absolutely shouldn't, but if you were hell-bent on keeping the branding, then you should say, we truly meant it to honour the people from First Nations peoples, and so in order to make that an actual thing and a tangible thing, we're going to start funding a rugby team. The Iroquois Roots Rugby. We're going to start funding our projects out in the tribes in Canada and in the US. That would create a tangible link between what you're branding and what you're trying to do. But they haven't done that at all. There's no suggestion there's any money going. It's just we want to have a guy with a native Indian headdress. And that's the other thing. Like, and again, I come back to. I think Lee made a very good point. How would people feel if someone said we're going? A team in America said we're going to put the Victoria Cross on our shirts, because that's what the same you're doing with the Native American headdress. It's something that's earned. We say, we're going to put the VC cross on because it looks cool, essentially.
So Tony Rowe just seems to enjoy playing dress up too much.
That's a problem.
That's what it is. And I mean, they seem to have built a good culture down there. But remember, he cancelled all those tickets. Who was it again?
It was
Flybe.
Yeah,
what's it? Flybe.
It was an airline. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like British Midlands, so it's like Flybe and all that. Once they went under, the free tickets were no longer valid.
Yeah, the week it happened as well. You would have thought they were giving a week's grace. You've lost your jobs, and then by the way, you can't come for free anymore.
I think they actually turned up at the gate and got turned away.
Sure. Yeah, there was no announcement about it. So, I mean, for all that, I think that's the thing is that goes shows. It's the difference between the culture at the top can be very often different from the culture that's actually on the field. So, like I said, the Chiefs, and I think it's important to separate that because I kind of feel bad for the players that are caught up in all this because at the end of the day, they're earning money. And you can't expect them to kind of walk because of issues like this, but you can kind of admire I think it sullies what they're doing at Exeter Chiefs culture-wise.
Could they do a Sonny Bill and cover? I saw somebody suggesting this on Twitter. Could they cover up the parts that they find offensive with tape with a player?
I think they could do. I think if you had a conscientious objection to it, you could cover it up with tape.
Yeah, it's not a sponsor either, so I don't think there's any. The advertisers wouldn't be able to complain about it. So yes, they're just a suggestion for you there, Chiefs.
Richie and Johnny Gray and Hoggy, on you go. Bit of black tape. Sam Skinner, a bit of black tape over the logo. You'll be away.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out who it was.
Take an E when they do the tomahawk chalk, even if you're in the middle of a game.
Or just if it's Hoggy, just like volley the ball towards him as hard as possible.
Yeah. So, that's going to rumble on. I can't decide. I've got two for mine. I'm going to do...
Oh, goodness me. Amnesty International Exeter branch have even now waded in on the Exeter Chiefs thing. Sorry to interrupt you there.
When Amnesty International are getting in on you, then you're... I don't know, you probably need to kind of start paying attention. The local MP's been speaking out against it as well. It's not like...
I know,
The only people that are actually in favour of it are just a few wallopers on the internet.
I was about to say, would that be people from a certain podcast, by any chance?
From another podcast, who start quoting different psychological theories about it, telling you why you shouldn't be anti-racist and should just let sleeping dogs lie. Nah. I know. Mad, a lot of them. Anyway, I'm going to do mine. I'm going to do a jingle within a jingle, just for the sake of it for mine, because I've decided last minute what mine's going to be. So mine's going to be this.
It's the legally mandated Lions chat. The legally mandated Lions chat. We've heard so much about it that it makes us sick. But we've still got a chat about who Gatlin's gonna pick.
Yes, I'm going to stick a legally mandated Lions chat in the middle of this, of Hands in the Ruck. There was a thing today. Stuart Lancaster has been touted as possibly being a Lions coach, and we're still over a year out on this, and so that just sparked a load of who's going to be coaching the Lions, and you just can't. It's so there's so much rugby to be played between now and then. It's a ridiculous thing to go and start speculating who's going to be like. And all Warren Gatland has said is, I've had conversations with Stuart Lancaster, and of course he has because he's a coach at Leinster, and you need to know how the Ireland boys are going. And I've no doubt that Stuart Lancaster would make a very good Lions coach. As an assistant coach for the Lions, I've no doubt about that. But the speculation has started already, and I know there's no rugby to talk of, and I know we did Lions chat last week, but that's only because we had an article on the blog about it. But it's too early.
Especially for something. Most people wouldn't even realise the sort of minutiae of what a coach is going to bring to the teams. do you really give that much of a toss? I mean, it's bad enough for the players, but once we get on to the coaches now, it's just...
I think the only thing I could say is, so long as there's, you would hope this time that there's a Scottish voice or a representative Scottish voice within the Lions coaching setup. I think that would be disappointing if there wasn't, because based on what the feedback that we've had since, that has been an issue in the last two tours, that there hasn't been someone speaking up for the Scottish players within the camp. So when it comes to the 50-50 calls, you haven't got someone there going, he's a good lad, he'll do what you tell him, or he'll toe the line, or he's a good tourist. If you haven't got someone there to speak up for them, of course they're going to go for the other boy every time. And that's Jason O'Halloran, I think, turned them down last time round. Gregor Townsend, understandably, because I think the role he was offered was deputy to Howley, Rob Howley last time, and he'd only just taken over the Scotland job.
He was to go down the bookies for Rob Howley.
That was the job, running the slips down the bookies.
go pick that up for his son.
He might have won a few more if Gregor had been helping him.
I probably would have just held it back in his pocket. Aye, right, Rob. And at the end of the tour, going, there's all you. Where's my winning, Gregor's? No, there's your stakes. I kept them all.
For your own good, son.
But I think that's it. I think it's too long. I was encouraged to see Peter de Villiers was named as a potential candidate, given the work he'd done with the Scottish Scrum. So that's, I think that would be interesting. And Gregor Townsend, again, I think it's talked up. And I think even Gregor Townsend said himself that he'd struggle to say no this time round. And I think if you look at history, actually, what's interesting is if he's got an eye on wanting to do that himself further down the line, then that's where Gatlin went out as an assistant to McGeechan.
Yeah.
So all future Lions coaches have tended to go out as an assistant on a previous tour.
Pathway.
It's pathway, that's it.
Started with that, finished with it.
Yep, there we go. So some unwanted Lions chat at the end to finish with. So thank you very much for listening.
I've got a year to go.
I know. There'll be more of this. That jingle will be ringing in your ears for another 12 months and more. Thank you to Stuart Ewans, who's popped up on Facebook to say, oi, oi, gents. I'm not sure I condone the use of oi, oi in a comment on Facebook. But it's nice to know people are watching and listening. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week. We've got some irons in the fire, but future people to speak to, things to do. There'll be some actual rugby to talk about at some point. But for the moment, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Ian and Sandy.
Hey, folks.